I met Elena Brooks on a gray Tuesday morning when the sky over Seattle looked heavy with rain. The therapy room smelled faintly of eucalyptus oil and fresh linen, the kind of scent that clings to your hands after hours of work. I had just finished with a marathon runner recovering from knee surgery when my receptionist peeked in and said, "Your last appointment's here, Dr. Clark." The basketball player. When Elena walked in, the first thing I noticed wasn't her fame, but the way she moved, cautious, deliberate, as if each step required calculation. Her right leg carried a stiffness that betrayed pain, though she tried to mask it with confidence. A dark hoodie hid her frame, but I could tell she was built like someone who had spent her life chasing motion. She smiled politely, but her eyes carried that guarded light I'd seen before in athletes who feared the end of their careers. "Dr. Clark?" she asked, voice low and rough, like someone who hadn't spoken much lately. I nodded and gestured to the treatment table. "You can call me Naomi," I said. "Let's start by seeing what we're working with." She sat, pulling the hoodie over her head, revealing a sleeveless shirt that showed defined shoulders and a small scar near her collarbone. There was something vulnerable in that moment, the quiet way she exhaled before lying back. I began the evaluation, keeping my voice steady and neutral. My fingers pressed against her hip, tracing the line of muscle to locate the tension point. She flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. "Does it hurt here?" "A little," she replied, though her expression said otherwise. I could feel her body tighten beneath my hands, not just from pain but from restraint. Every movement I made, every breath she took, filled the space between us with an awareness I couldn't ignore. I stepped back, breaking the silence before it became something neither of us could name. "You've been compensating with your left side," I said, jotting notes. "That's putting extra strain on your hip joint. How long since the injury?" 8 months, she said, eyes fixed on the floor. "I landed wrong during a playoff in Spain. I've tried everything, stretching, deep tissue, acupuncture, but it still catches." I studied her posture. There was a controlled frustration in the way she held herself, the determination of someone used to pushing past pain. "Your scans show a possible labral tear," I said carefully. "It's manageable, but it'll take patience. This isn't just about strength, it's about retraining your body to trust itself again." Her gaze lifted to meet mine, and, for a second, something in her expression softened. "That's hard to do," she murmured. "I know," I said quietly. "But it's possible." She smiled then, just a small curve of her lips, but it was the first real smile I'd seen that day. It made the room feel a little less cold. We spent the next hour working through range of motion tests, her movements precise but hesitant. I guided her leg through slow rotations, feeling the resistance in the joint. The sound of rain began tapping on the window, steady and soft. Occasionally, our eyes met, and each time it did, I felt a flicker of something I wasn't supposed to notice. I told myself it was professional empathy, the kind every healer feels for their patient. But the warmth spreading through my chest said otherwise. When the session ended, I gave her a printed exercise plan and a follow-up schedule. 3 sessions a week, I said. "We'll take it step by step. No rushing." Elena nodded, sliding her hoodie back on. "You think I'll play again?" Her question hung in the air. I hesitated, not because I didn't believe it, but because I understood what she was really asking. She wasn't just asking about her career, she was asking if she could still be who she used to be. "I think you'll move again," I said finally. "Maybe not the same way, but maybe better." That earned me a real laugh, light and low, and it startled me with how much I wanted to hear it again. After she left, I stayed in the room longer than necessary. Her scent lingered faintly, something clean, like soap and rain. I tried to shake it off, reminding myself that attraction wasn't part of the treatment plan. Still, when I wrote her name in my notes, I traced the letters slower than usual. The next day, she came back early, hair damp from drizzle, sneakers squeaking against the tile. "I thought I'd warm up before we start," she said, waving awkwardly. I couldn't help smiling at her initiative. I showed her how to use the resistance bands, standing close enough to adjust her posture. "Lift from your core," I reminded her. "Not your hip. Imagine pulling the strength from here." I tapped lightly just below her ribs. She obeyed, concentration tightening her jaw. For a moment, I forgot about the clock, the paperwork, everything except the quiet rhythm of her breathing. When she lost balance slightly, I reached out instinctively, steadying her arm. My fingers brushed her skin warm, smooth, alive. We froze, both pretending it hadn't happened. She looked up, eyes a shade darker now. "Sorry," I said quickly. "It's okay," she whispered, but her voice trembled the way mine wanted to. That night, I replayed the scene in my head, telling myself it was nothing. Just part of the job. But the truth was, I hadn't felt a connection like that in years, maybe ever. It unsettled me more than I cared to admit. Our third session came 2 days later. She had improved already, her stride more confident, the hesitation fading. I watched her stretch, the curve of her back catching the light through the window. When she caught me looking, I turned away too quickly, pretending to check a chart. "Are you always this serious, Naomi?" she teased. "Occupational hazard," I replied, trying to sound detached. "You should smile more," she said, grabbing the medicine ball. "You'd scare fewer people." Her laughter filled the room, playful and effortless. I found myself smiling before I could stop it. By the end of the week, I realized something had shifted. Our conversations flowed easier, our silences less heavy. I learned she liked black coffee, hated plane rides, and had a habit of humming when she focused. She learned that I lived alone, loved the smell of rain, and collected old books I never finished reading. It should have stayed professional, but it didn't feel that way anymore. There was something growing between us, fragile but undeniable. Every session brought a new layer of understanding, a shared glance that lasted too long, a laugh that lingered after she left. One evening, as I locked the clinic, I saw her waiting under the awning, hands stuffed in her pockets. "You shouldn't be out in the rain," I said. "I wanted to say thank you," she replied, "for not treating me like I'm broken." The words hit deeper than I expected. I wanted to tell her she wasn't broken at all, that she was the most alive thing to walk into my world in years. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded, pretending to adjust my umbrella. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the reflection of the streetlights in her eyes. "See you Monday, dear." "Clark," she said softly. And just like that, she turned and walked into the misty night, leaving me standing there, umbrella forgotten, heart beating louder than the rain. That was the night I knew this wasn't just another case. Something in me had started to move again too, something that had been still for far too long. The next few weeks passed with a rhythm that felt both comforting and dangerous. Elena came in early most days, always with a cup of coffee in her hand, always with that small, knowing smile that made my chest tighten. She had started to laugh more, to tease me about my doctor face whenever I grew too focused. I told myself I was only watching her progress, that my attention was clinical, analytical, professional. But every time she looked at me, that logic crumbled a little more. Her recovery was steady. The stiffness in her movements eased with each session, and her strength began to return. Watching her push through the limits of her body felt like witnessing someone relearn how to believe in themselves. I admired her discipline, her quiet resilience, the way she refused to let pain define her. But admiration, I learned, could be a dangerous beginning. One afternoon, while she practiced controlled squats, I stood behind her to observe alignment. "Keep your core steady," I said, my voice lower than I intended. "Don't let your hip drop." She adjusted, glancing over her shoulder to make sure I was watching. Our eyes met briefly, and a flicker of warmth passed between us, unspoken but alive. I looked away first, pretending to note her progress on the clipboard. Afterward, she sat on the edge of the table, stretching. "You always write so much," she teased, tying her hair back. "Are you grading me?" "Just making sure you don't overdo it," I said, still writing though the pen had stopped moving. "You worry too much," she said softly. "Occupational hazard," I replied again, and she smiled at the repetition, as if she was collecting pieces of me every time I reused the same line. That night, I dreamed of water. I was standing at the edge of Green Lake, the sky dim, the air still. I could hear her laugh somewhere behind me, but when I turned, no one was there. The next morning, I woke with a faint taste of longing I couldn't name. By the 4th week, her strength had improved enough for me to test rotational movement. I asked her to lie on her side, and as I adjusted her position, my hand brushed against the curve of her waist. The contact was brief, accidental, yet it sent a ripple through me that I could not disguise. I stepped back quickly, focusing on the monitor, but the heat in my neck betrayed me. "Did I do that wrong?" she asked, voice calm but eyes sharp. "No," I said quickly. "You're doing fine." She didn't press further, but her gaze lingered a little longer than it should have. The air between us seemed thicker after that, charged with something neither of us dared to name. Later that week, she texted me a photo of her dinner, grilled salmon with steamed vegetables, asking if her nutrition plan looked PT approved. It was the first message outside of appointment times, and it felt oddly intimate, like she had stepped into a corner of my life I hadn't invited anyone into for years. I replied briefly, keeping it professional, but she sent a laughing emoji that made me smile despite myself. Soon, her messages became part of my evenings. They were never intrusive, just small things, pictures of her morning jog, a quote she found inspiring, a complaint about the Seattle rain. I responded cautiously, but I didn't stop her. I liked the sound of her name lighting up my phone. During our next session, I noticed something different. Her focus had sharpened, her movements smoother, her confidence blooming again. When she finished, sweat glistened on her temples, and she grinned at me with the easy pride of someone who'd reclaimed a part of themselves. "I'm starting to feel like me again," she said, catching her breath. "That's the point," I replied. "Progress happens when the body remembers." She tilted her head, curiosity softening her features. "And what about you, Naomi? Do you ever forget yourself?" The question startled me. For a moment, I forgot the line between us. "Sometimes," I said quietly. "But I've learned not everything broken needs fixing." She studied me as though trying to memorize the expression behind those words. Then she smiled, slow and thoughtful, like she understood exactly what I meant. As days passed, I became aware of how much she occupied my thoughts. I caught myself waiting for her messages, replaying moments of our sessions long after they ended. I was careful, always careful, but emotion is not something easily contained. It seeps through, quiet but persistent, like water finding its way through stone. One evening, after her workout, the clinic was nearly empty. The rain outside had turned heavier, drumming softly against the windows. She was finishing her cool down when the power flickered briefly, dimming the lights. The air smelled faintly of rain and eucalyptus. "You should go before it gets worse," I said. She laughed, shaking her head. "You say that like you think I'm afraid of a little weather." "Seattle rain isn't little," I said, smiling without meaning to. When she turned toward me, her expression changed, quiet but intense. She took a slow step closer. "You always look different when you smile," she said. "You should do it more often." The words came out like a whisper meant for no one else. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I took a step back, enough to reestablish distance, enough to remember who I was supposed to be. "Elena," I began, my voice softer than intended, "I think we should reassign your case." Her brows furrowed. "Why?" "It's better for your recovery," I said, forcing calm. "You're past the acute stage. Dr. Shaw can take over your next phase." She studied my face, reading what I couldn't say aloud. "You're afraid this will become something it shouldn't." Her honesty was disarming. I looked away, busying myself with paperwork I didn't need. "It's just protocol," I murmured. "Protocol," she repeated, her tone almost amused. "You hide behind that word like it's armor." I didn't answer. She didn't push. The silence stretched, filled only by the faint hum of the lights. When she left, she didn't say goodbye. For the first time since we met, the room felt cold again. That night, I sat at my kitchen table long after midnight, staring at the rain sliding down the window. I had spent my entire career mastering the art of distance between patient and doctor, between empathy and attachment. Yet here I was, missing the sound of her laugh like it was oxygen. The next morning, I informed the front desk to move Elena's remaining sessions to DR. Sha. My voice was steady, my reasoning sound. But as soon as her name left my lips, I felt something tighten in my chest. Later that day, my phone buzzed. A message from her. You don't have to disappear just because you're scared. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't trust what I might say. The following week was quieter. My schedule filled with new patients, yet every time the door opened, a small part of me expected her to walk in. I told myself she needed space, that this was the right decision. Still, some nights, I found myself rereading old texts, tracing the shape of her words on the screen like they were fingerprints. Then one evening, just as I was locking up, I heard a familiar voice. You forgot this, she said, holding up a towel I'd apparently left in the gym. I hadn't seen her since that last conversation. She looked different, more rested, more certain. You shouldn't be here, I said, but the protest sounded weak. Relax, Naomi. I just wanted to drop it off. She stepped inside, setting the towel on the counter. Priya's great, by the way. She keeps talking about your techniques like you're some legend. I smiled faintly. She exaggerates. Maybe, Elena said, her tone lighter now, but she's right about one thing. You don't let people in easily. The rain outside softened to a drizzle. She moved closer, her presence familiar yet strange. I'm not asking for anything, she said. I just wanted you to know I'm okay. And that I get it. Sometimes the right thing doesn't feel right at all. Before I could answer, she turned toward the door. Good night, Dr. Clark. Her voice lingered after she left, softer than the rain, but it echoed in my head long into the night. For the first time in years, I realized how fragile the lines we draw can be, how easily they blur when the heart refuses to obey. I had chosen the safe path, the one paved with caution and rules, but the emptiness that followed told me safety had never been the same as peace. And deep down, I already knew this wasn't the end of our story. It was only the pause before everything began to change. Spring arrived quietly in Seattle, washing the city with soft light after months of drizzle. I hadn't seen Elena for almost 3 weeks. Life returned to its disciplined rhythm, patients, reports, long evenings at home with tea that always went cold. Yet the silence she left behind filled every space, like a shadow that refused to leave. I told myself she had moved on, that distance was for the best. Still, every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was her. Then one Saturday morning, she appeared outside the clinic. Her hair was loose, wind-swept, her expression unreadable. She held 2 paper cups of coffee. I was nearby, she said, as if that explained everything. Thought you might still like black coffee. I hesitated before accepting it. The warmth of the cup seeped into my fingers, grounding me. You remembered. She shrugged, smiling faintly. Some things are hard to forget. We stood in silence for a moment. The city around us was just waking up, the air smelling faintly of salt and rain. She asked if I still went walking around Green Lake. I nodded, and before I could stop myself, I said, "Do you want to join me?" Her eyes softened. I was hoping you'd ask. We walked side by side, keeping a polite distance at first. The path curved around the water, ducks gliding over its glassy surface. I could hear her quiet breathing, steady and calm, and it pulled at something deep in me. She talked about her new coach, about training with modified drills. I listened, pretending not to notice the way the sunlight touched her skin. After a while, she stopped and looked at the water. You know, when you pulled away, I thought I'd be angry, she said. But I wasn't. I was just sad. Because for the first time, I met someone who didn't see me as a machine. Her honesty made it hard to speak. It wasn't easy, I said. But you deserved a therapist who could focus without. I trailed off, unsure how to finish. Without feeling something, she asked softly. I met her gaze, unable to lie. Yes. She nodded, her expression neither triumphant nor hurt, just thoughtful. I guess we both failed at pretending, didn't we? We continued walking until we reached the small dock near the park's edge. The surface of the lake shimmered with moving light, the air cool and sweet. She sat down first, letting her legs dangle over the water. I joined her, leaving a small gap between us. "I miss this," she said quietly. "Being here. Talking to you." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I missed it too. The confession hung between us, fragile and real. She glanced at me, her eyes searching for something, maybe permission. "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded. "When was the last time you let someone close?" The question struck deeper than she knew. "It's been a while," I admitted. "I stopped trying after my marriage ended. I told myself I was fine alone." "And are you?" "I thought I was." She looked away, tracing small ripples with the tip of her shoe. "I used to think love was supposed to be easy," she said. "Fast. Like a win you didn't have to fight for. But the older I get, the more I think it's about patience. And timing." I turned toward her, feeling the truth in her words. "Timing," I repeated quietly. "That's a cruel teacher." She smiled faintly. "Maybe. But sometimes, second chances wait for those who listen." The wind picked up, carrying a faint chill. A few drops of water splashed against her hand. She looked down at them, then up at me. "I still come here when I need to think," she said. "It reminds me that movement doesn't always mean progress. Sometimes staying still is the hardest thing." There was a pause, the kind that stretched but didn't break. Then she stood, brushing her hands on her jeans. "Come on," she said. "You can't spend your whole life watching other people heal." Before I could answer, she stepped toward the lake's edge, her sneakers sinking slightly into the damp wood. "You trust me, right?" The question was simple but heavy. I hesitated, then nodded. She grinned, mischievous. "Good. Then follow me." She kicked off her shoes and walked into the water. The surface rippled around her calves. "It's freezing," she said through a laugh, "but it feels alive." I stared at her, part disbelief, part awe. "You'll catch a cold." "Then come save me, doctor." Her tone was playful, but her eyes stared me. I sighed, pulled off my own shoes, and stepped in. The shock of cold water stole my breath. She reached out, steadying me with one hand. The contact burned like heat despite the chill. "See," she said. "Not so bad." The lake was calm, a mirror reflecting clouds that moved lazily above us. We stood there, two figures knee-deep in water, laughing quietly like people who had just remembered how. Then she grew serious. "Naomi," she said softly, "do you still think this is wrong?" Her question was gentle, not demanding. I met her gaze, the sunlight glinting in her eyes. "I think it's complicated." She stepped closer, the water rippling between us. "Everything worth feeling is." My heart pounded. The world felt smaller, reduced to her voice and the faint sound of water against our legs. She reached for my hand, and this time, I didn't pull away. Her fingers were warm, strong, certain. The air around us seemed to pause. When she leaned in, I didn't stop her. Her lips brushed mine, soft at first, then firmer as I responded. The taste of lake water and rain mixed with the faint sweetness of her breath. My body trembled, not from cold, but from release. It wasn't a desperate kiss, but one that carried every word we had never said aloud. When we finally broke apart, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full, like the moment before dawn when the world holds its breath. She smiled faintly. "You didn't flinch this time." I didn't want to. We walked back to shore, shoes in hand, our clothes damp and heavy. The sky had darkened slightly, streaked with gray clouds. She sat on the grass, wringing water from her hair, while I stood nearby, trying to process what had just happened. "You don't have to say anything," she said quietly. "I just needed you to know what I feel." I sat beside her, the damp earth cool beneath my palms. "And what do you feel?" She glanced at me, her expression open, unguarded. "Peace. When I'm with you, everything else stops hurting." Her words loosened something inside me, a knot I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I turned to face her. "You make me forget to be afraid," I admitted. Her smile deepened, slow and radiant. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Then maybe that's what healing looks like." We stayed there until the light began to fade, the lake turning silver under the evening sky. She lay back on the grass, eyes closed, her hand resting near mine. I watched her, memorizing the shape of her smile, the quiet rise and fall of her chest. It felt unreal that something so gentle could exist after so many years of restraint. When she finally opened her eyes, she whispered, "I didn't think I'd find someone like you." Someone like me? Someone who listens without trying to fix everything. I wanted to tell her that she'd already fixed more than she knew. Instead, I just reached for her hand again. She intertwined our fingers without hesitation. The sun disappeared completely, leaving the sky painted in faint pink and blue. The sound of the water, the distant chatter of people packing up their picnics, the hum of the city returning to life all blended into a rhythm that felt like breathing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an observer of life. I was part of it, messy and uncertain, but alive. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring or if we could navigate what waited beyond that lake. But in that moment, with her beside me, I stopped caring about rules and boundaries. As we walked back to the parking lot, the air cooling around us, she slipped her hand into mine again, casual, natural. No hesitation this time. We didn't need words. The world felt quieter, softer, as if even the wind approved. That night, as I lay in bed, the scent of lake water still clinging to my skin, I realized something had changed irreversibly. I wasn't just her former therapist or a woman hiding behind professionalism. I was someone who had been kissed under an open sky by a woman who made me feel whole again. And for once, I didn't want to take it back. The following weeks unfolded with a warmth I had almost forgotten existed. Elena and I began to see each other outside the clinic, no longer by accident or excuse. Sometimes she would bring me lunch between appointments, claiming it was for research on nutrition and recovery, though she always stayed long enough to make me laugh. Other evenings we met at the small cafe near the harbor, where the owner already started greeting us as regulars. The city that once felt like concrete and rain now seemed gentler, brighter, as if it had been waiting for us to notice it. When she smiled across the table, I felt something tender expand inside me, something that made even ordinary silence feel like a conversation. There were moments when I caught myself studying her in quiet awe, the way her fingers drummed against her cup, the way she bit her lip when thinking. I was learning her the way one learns a song by heart. One Sunday, she suggested a drive to the mountains. Just for the day, she said. No plans. Just air, trees, and the illusion of peace. I hesitated, then agreed. By noon, we were far from the city, the road twisting through forests dripping with morning mist. The car smelled faintly of pine and Elena's perfume. Music played low, something soft that matched the hum of the rain against the windshield. We stopped near a lake rimmed with fir trees. The air was cold and clean, and the sky mirrored perfectly on the still surface of the water. Elena spread out a blanket on the damp grass, unpacking sandwiches and fruit. Picnic therapy, she said, grinning. No charts, no exercises, no guilt. I sat beside her, the ground cool beneath the blanket. We ate slowly, sharing small stories that didn't need conclusions. She fed me a strawberry dipped in honey, laughing when it stained my lip. I reached out to wipe the smear away, and before I could pull my hand back, she caught it gently. You always look so serious, she said. Even when you're happy. I'm not good at showing things, I admitted. Her expression softened. Then let me help. The kiss that followed was unhurried, deliberate, as though we both wanted to memorize it. The scent of rain and earth wrapped around us and time blurred. I had kissed people before, but this felt different. It wasn't about passion alone, it was about recognition. For the first time, I felt seen, wholly and without condition. We lay back, the lake stretched before us like glass. She held my hand as clouds drifted overhead, and for a while, neither of us spoke. I thought about how strange life was, how love could find you long after you'd stopped believing in it. Then, faint footsteps crunched behind us. I turned, startled, and froze. Standing a few feet away was my mother, her umbrella tilted slightly against the drizzle. My younger sister, Claire, stood beside her wide-eyed. I hadn't seen them in months. They must have recognized my car near the trail. For a moment, no one spoke. Elena sat up, her hand slipping from mine, her expression a mix of surprise and concern. My mother's eyes moved between us, sharp but not cruel, just confused. The silence felt unbearable. "Mom," I said, finally standing. "What are you doing here?" "We were hiking," she replied, her voice calm, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "I didn't expect to find you here." Her gaze flicked to Elena, who gave a small, polite smile. "This is Elena," I said, my throat tight. She was a patient. "We're friends." The word tasted incomplete. Claire shifted uncomfortably. "We should probably keep walking," she murmured, but my mother didn't move. Elena stood then, rain beginning to gather in her hair. "It's okay," she said softly to me. "You don't have to explain." But I did. I wanted to. I took a breath that felt too deep. "Mom," I said, "Elena's important to me. I care about her." My mother's expression changed slightly, though I couldn't tell if it was understanding or disbelief. She nodded once slowly. "I see." The conversation ended there, but its weight lingered. They left with polite goodbyes, their figures fading down the path. When they were gone, I exhaled shakily. Elena touched my shoulder. "Are you okay?" I nodded, though my heart was still pounding. "I didn't want you to find out like that." She smiled gently. "There's never an easy way, Naomi. Don't worry. You didn't do anything wrong." But guilt pressed down on me all the same. That evening, my mother called. Her tone was measured, cautious. She didn't ask direct questions, but I could sense her trying to piece together what she'd seen. I told her the truth that I hadn't planned this, that it wasn't some reckless phase. There was a pause, then she said, "You've always been careful." "Maybe too careful." "If this makes you happy, I hope you know what that means." It wasn't approval, but it wasn't rejection either. It was something fragile between the two. The next day, Elena stopped by my house with groceries. She moved through my kitchen as if she belonged there, humming under her breath. "You haven't eaten properly, have you?" she said, opening the fridge and frowning at the emptiness. I laughed quietly. "You sound like my mother." "Then I'm doing something right," she said, setting a pot on the stove. The smell of garlic filled the air, comforting and familiar. I watched her move, graceful even in small domestic gestures. When we sat down to eat, she looked at me seriously. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Whatever happens with your family, whatever people think I am staying." Her certainty steadied me. I reached across the table, fingers brushing hers. "You make everything feel less impossible," I said. That night she stayed. We didn't plan it, but neither of us wanted to leave. We sat on the couch with tea and a blanket, the sound of rain against the windows like a soft heartbeat. At some point, she rested her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. It felt natural, as if we'd done it 100 times before. I was scared today, I admitted. Not because of them, but because it felt like they saw the real me for the first time. Elena tilted her face toward mine. "Maybe that's not something to fear. Maybe that's freedom." I smiled at her, slow and unguarded. "You always make it sound simple." "It's not," she said, her eyes warm. "But it's worth it." We sat like that until the tea went cold, until the city lights dimmed outside. At some point, I realized she had fallen asleep, her breathing soft and steady against me. I looked down at her and felt an ache so deep it almost hurt, the kind that comes when you finally find something you didn't know you were missing. Outside, the rain softened to a mist. I watched it trail down the glass and thought about how fragile and beautiful life could be when you stopped resisting it. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was hiding. I wasn't defined by my past or my profession or anyone's expectations. I was simply there with her in that quiet room filled with warmth and the scent of rain. When she stirred in her sleep, murmuring my name, I whispered back, "I'm here." And I meant it in every way a person can. The weeks after that day with my mother unfolded quietly, as if life had decided to give us space to breathe. The awkward tension faded slowly, replaced by cautious understanding. My mother didn't bring up what she'd seen again, but her calls became more frequent and her tone softened. I sensed that she was trying, in her own careful way, to accept the part of me she hadn't known before. It was enough. Elena became a constant in my world. Her presence filled the small apartment with warmth, the kind that lingers in the air long after she leaves a room. She kept her things scattered everywhere, training shoes near the door, a jacket draped across my chair, a toothbrush resting beside mine. Each item was small, ordinary, but together they felt like proof that she belonged here. Every morning she rose early to run along the bay. I'd wake to the sound of the front door closing, the faint rhythm of her footsteps fading down the street. Sometimes she brought me coffee afterward, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her hair damp with mist. "You should come next time," she'd say, though she knew I preferred watching her return. We learned each other's rhythms the way people do when they start building a life together. I cooked late dinners after long shifts, and she insisted on washing the dishes even though she always missed a spot or two. She filled the apartment with laughter, music, and energy that balanced my quiet nature. It wasn't perfect. We argued about trivial things, like how much salt I used or the way she left lights on, but even our disagreements felt alive. On weekends, we volunteered at the rehabilitation center downtown, offering free sessions for young athletes recovering from injuries. She taught them confidence while I guided them through movement. Seeing her talk to the kids, crouched low to meet their eyes, I realized that her gift wasn't just strength, it was empathy disguised as determination. She believed in them with the same fire she once used to rebuild herself. One Saturday afternoon, we organized a small outdoor event by the lake for the program's anniversary. Families came with blankets and food, children chased each other across the grass, and the sound of laughter echoed through the air. When the crowd settled for speeches, Elena stood beside me, holding my hand loosely at her side. She looked different now, stronger, but also softer around the edges. "I never thought I'd be here," she whispered. "Not like this." "Where did you think you'd be?" I asked. "Probably somewhere chasing trophies," she said with a small smile. "But this feels more real." I squeezed her hand. "You're still winning, Elena. Just differently." After the event, we stayed behind to help clean up. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with shades of gold and violet. The lake shimmered in the fading light, and a faint breeze stirred the trees. We spread a blanket near the water, sharing the leftovers from earlier. She fed me a piece of apple, laughing when the juice dripped down my chin. I leaned forward, kissing her fingers in mock revenge, and she laughed harder, the sound spilling into the air like music. The moment felt too beautiful to stay silent in. I looked at her, the person who had turned my world upside down and somehow made it feel steadier. "You know," I said quietly, "I never planned for any of this. You, us, all of it." She smiled, tilting her head. "Would you change it if you could?" "Not a single thing." Her gaze softened, and she reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "Then stop thinking so much, Naomi. Just live it." We lay back, side by side, watching the clouds drift lazily above us. The world around us grew quiet, the last light fading into blue. I felt her fingers trace idle shapes against my palm, and something inside me stilled. It wasn't passion in that moment, but peace, the kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you should be. After a long while, she said softly, "Do you ever think about the future?" "All the time," I admitted. "And for once, it doesn't scare me." She turned her head toward me, eyes reflecting the silver sheen of the lake. "Then we're already doing something right." We stayed there until the stars appeared, scattered like faint whispers above the water. The reflection shimmered, fragile and endless. She turned onto her side, resting her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. I could feel her heartbeat, steady and calm, syncing with mine. That night, as we drove home, the road curved through the forest, quiet except for the hum of the engine. She reached across the console, her hand finding mine. The headlights cut through the darkness, guiding us forward. There was something comforting about the simplicity of Itwo people driving through the night, no destination beyond each other. Months passed. Our routines deepened into habits, and our habits into comfort. I watched her career shift from athlete to mentor, her passion finding a new direction. She helped design a community project that provided free training and rehabilitation for young women who couldn't afford it. She named it More Than Motion. When she asked me to join as a consultant, I didn't hesitate. Working beside her felt natural, like two currents merging into one. We balanced each other, her impulsive creativity, my steady precision. Together we built something that felt bigger than both of us, something that carried our story quietly within its purpose. One evening, after a long day at the center, we returned home drenched from a sudden rainstorm. We left our shoes by the door, dripping onto the mat, and she pulled me close, laughing breathlessly. Water glistened on her skin, her hair clinging to her face. She kissed me, deep and certain, and I realized how far we'd come from that first cautious touch in the clinic. We ended up on the floor, tangled in laughter and damp clothes, the room filled with the scent of rain and warmth. When she whispered, "I love you," it wasn't a grand confession. It was simple, like breathing. "I love you too," I said, and the truth of it felt infinite. Later, we sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights blur through raindrops. She leaned her head against mine. "Do you ever wonder what people think when they see us?" "Sometimes," I said. "But it matters less every day." She smiled, tracing circles on my wrist. "Good. Because I want to stop hiding from happy things." The rain slowed to a drizzle, the sound soft and rhythmic. I thought of everything that had led us here, the uncertainty, the distance, the quiet bravery it took to love someone openly. I realized that love, at its truest, wasn't about control or perfection. It was about letting the world see you, even when it might not understand. As night deepened, she fell asleep beside me, her breathing steady against my shoulder. I stayed awake for a while, listening to the fading rain. Outside, the streets shimmered under the streetlights, reflections rippling across puddles. I thought about the woman I used to be, one who lived by rules, who measured safety as success. That version of me had learned to survive, but not to feel. Elena changed that. She taught me that healing isn't about erasing scars, but learning to live beautifully with them. When dawn came, soft light spilled through the window, touching her face. I brushed a strand of hair from her cheek and whispered, "You make everything worth beginning again." Her eyes fluttered open, still heavy with sleep, and she smiled. "Then let's keep beginning," she murmured. And we did. As the city stirred awake outside, we sat there wrapped in quiet certainty, knowing that whatever waited beyond that morning, we would face it together, two hearts moving in the same rhythm, beneath the same sky, finally unafraid. Love isn't always found in the places we expect. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a whisper after the storm, and suddenly everything that once felt ordinary begins to glow with meaning. Naomi and Elena's story reminds us that healing doesn't just happen in clinics or through therapy sessions. It happens in the spaces between two hearts that dare to open, in the courage to be seen, and in the tenderness of being accepted as you are. Their journey wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty, patience, and learning that love can grow in the most uncertain places. From a professional bond to something deeper, they found in each other not rescue, but recognition. Every touch, every shared silence, became a reminder that real love asks for presence more than promises. As they learned to move together through fear, forgiveness, and joy, they discovered that connection isn't defined by rules or expectations. It's defined by the bravery to choose each other again and again. This was Beneath the Surface, a story about healing, rediscovery, and love between two women who found light where they once saw limits. Thank you for watching. This is She and SHE.